Good afternoon, students. This is once again Anshu Sharma from Government College Chaksu. I welcome you all, the students of second year English literature. We are still doing Byron's There is a Pleasure in the Pathless Woods, and yesterday I think finished the fifth stanza with you, and I had discussed how Byron very clearly states the power of the ocean in comparison to the power of man, and he found the power of man sadly lacking, and sadly nothing in comparison to the kind of power that the ocean wields. It's actually the ocean that has the power to power to erect the huge empires over which man feels very proud of himself and his so-called achievements. But before the mighty ocean, the mankind and his huge great empires are brought to naught. So with the same idea, the poet further talks about the beauty of the ocean. He further emphasizes the power of the ocean, and from the sixth paragraph onwards his mood slightly changes. Like initially he just introduced us to the pleasure of walking in the pathless woods, and he described the forest, he described the ocean, and then he moved on to talking about the power of the ocean, the power of man and their relationship. And now when more than half the poem is complete, you'll see that there is a certain shift in the mood of the poet, and he goes on, no doubt he goes on to just talk about the beauty of the ocean, and he is in a way giving us reasons. He's giving us the different reasons as to why he feels that the ocean is mightier than man. And then he moves on to describe the beauty of the ocean and why it is powerful. Up till the fifth paragraph, he's talked about the destruction, the power of destruction that the ocean has over man and his empires. And now in the sixth paragraph, I have purposely, you can see the picture that I have before you. I mean, if you notice the picture on the screen, I have purposely taken a picture which very beautiful. This has been taken from in the internet. Let me be very clear about that. It is not a picture that has been taken by me. It has been taken from the internet. Internet is the source. And here, but it embodies very beautifully what Byron is trying to tell us. You can see a man walking besides the seashore. You can see the calmness of the waters. You can see that froth, what I had tried to explain to you yesterday. You can see that the sea waves, they have that whitish foam on its edge. Then you can see the vast sky above it, the trees on the sides, and you can see the sand, the beautiful golden sand over which this man is walking. So you can almost imagine that this is Byron walking besides the seashore, and he's absorbing the beauty of the ocean. At this particular point of time in this picture, you can see the ocean seems to be very calm, but this same ocean can be raging. This same ocean can be home to a tsunami, and it has those huge the huge waves breaking over the seashore and destroying anything that comes in its path. So I purposely chose this picture to give you an idea of what Byron was experiencing when he talked about walking next to the seashore, besides the seashore, all alone, in his own company, undisturbed by men, undisturbed by the company of other human beings. So he's being in his own, in this solitude, being solitary, and he's enjoying his own company and the beauty of the ocean. So with this, I'll just move on to the sixth paragraph and let's just analyze it. Here now, before you on the screens is the sixth paragraph. Before going into the analysis, I'll just quickly read the paragraph so you can just get the hang of the rhyme scheme. Thou glorious mirror, where the Almighty's form glasses itself in tempests, in all time, calm or convulsed, in breeze or gale or storm, icing the pole, or in the torrid clime, dark heaving, boundless, endless, and sublime. The image of eternity, the throne of the invisible, even from out thy slime, the monsters of the deep are made. Each zone obeys thee. Thou goest forth, dread, fathomless, alone. So here, just reading this stanza, it is kind of the grandeur of the ocean, the solitariness of the ocean itself also has been emphasized here, and he has used various epithets to describe the beauty of the ocean. And let's just take up the word meanings. In the first line, he says mirror. Now, here, mirror has been used as a metaphor. It has been, it's not, he is just trying to tell us that the sea is like a mirror. And what is it mirroring? It is mirroring the Almighty's form. It is mirroring the God Himself. Then glasses, again, it is continuation of the same idea. Glasses means reflects. Here, glasses does not mean the actual glass, rather, it means the reflection, that it is reflecting. And tempest means storm. Tempest is again an old word. Last year, when we were doing Merchant of Venice, we had talked about the word tempest. Tempest means storm. Calm, again peaceful, something that is silent, something that is gentle, that is, at peace with itself. In comparison, contrast, you have the word convulsed. Convulsed is turbulent, something that is upheaving, something that is not, still, something that is going all topsy-turvy. That is turbulent, that is convulsed. Then in the next line, torrid. Torrid means hot. Like, for example, we live in Rajasthan, and Rajasthan has a pretty torrid climate. It has a hot climate. May, June, July are extremely, July, maybe not July, because we get rainfall during that month. But from April onwards, April, May and June are terribly hot. So torrid. Climb is a short form of climate. It's again an old a word of the Old English. Climate. Dark heaving, again heaving, upheaval, turbulence. Then eternity, next line you can see eternity refers to boundless, eternal, just like God Himself. For God, what do we say? That God is eternal. He was there before time, He was there before this earth was created, before man was born, and He will remain even after this whole planet, this whole earth is destroyed. There is this power that is going to exist forever. So that is eternal. So eternity is something that, just like God, that is going to remain. हिंदी में इसको कहते हैं शाश्वत. ठीक है. Then invisible, who's invisible? God actually, none of us have seen God does not have any form, any defined form. Nobody has seen God as such. So invisible, that is reference to God. Next line, monsters is reference to the sea monsters. Now in the previous paragraph I had described the word Leviathan to you. Now Leviathan are also huge sea monsters. All of us know that you have those huge whales, you have the sharks, you have huge animals living underwater. So it is these huge animals which are being referred to here, and he is calling them, addressing them as sea monsters. Each zone, now zone, I think most of my students have geography also. So in geography, I think you have done, we have 5 zones. In geography, you must have read these 5 zones. Latitudinally, these zones are divided. On top and on the bottom, you have the Arctic and the Antarctic. So like that, you have these zones, and according to those, the temperature varies. As you keep going towards the poles, it keeps getting colder and colder. And in the central zone, you have really hot climate. And as you move towards north, it becomes cooler. So as you move away from the sunlight, those zones are cooler, while the zones that get direct sunlight over them have very hot climate, have very torrid climate. So zone is referring to these 5 zones. Then goest is again Old English. It is actually going forward, right? Dread is again fearful. And fathomless is a pretty common word, though it is used basically used for the sea. That sea is so deep, the oceans are so deep that they seem to have no land, as if they don't have any ground below. They are fathomless, you cannot measure their depth. That is the depth. So fathomless, where the depth cannot be measured, it's that deep. So bottomless, as if it is a bottomless pit, it's unending, that deepness. Okay, so now I have given you the word meanings. Now let's just quickly analyze the poem. These lines are very beautiful and I really enjoy reading them, and what the poet is trying to tell us through these beautiful verses. See now, thou glorious mirror, where the Almighty's form glasses itself in tempests. Now, this is the first line. This is the first line that makes complete sense. What the poet is trying to say, he's again addressing the ocean. Okay. Now, the ocean is the focus of the poet. The ocean is the focus of this poem. And here again, he says that you are like a glorious mirror. Now, for example, a mirror, well, all of us have mirrors in our homes and we look at the mirrors every day. It's a common thing. But here he is using the word glorious. Our mirrors are something very common, ordinary. But this ocean is glorious. Thou glorious mirror. Look at the epithet, that the metaphor that the poet is using. He says you are a glorious mirror. You are a magnificent, beautiful, grand. You are a mirror where what is seen? Where the Almighty's form glasses itself. Now, glasses itself, reflection, because when we look into the mirror, our reflection looks back at us. Okay, so the same thing, the same imagery is being used here by the poet, but here the poet addresses the ocean as the mirror of the Almighty himself or herself, God himself. For convenience, I'm going to use himself. Okay, let's not get into gender discussion here. To make things easier, I'll just stick to him. We'll address God as him. Okay, stick to a little bit of patriarchy. Anyways, so here Almighty is, looks, or you can say the reflection of the Almighty is seen in the ocean through the tempests. How does God tell us that he is there, that the God's presence is experienced? Because as I have just told you, God is formless, does not have a body, does not have a figure. We have not seen God, nobody has seen God. Okay, so the physical presence is not felt. But how do we come to know that God is there? That is the main question. So here the poet says, you beautiful glorious mirror, the Almighty's form is reflected through the storms. When you have those horrible, those very windy, stormy climate, when you have those storms that are raging over the waters of the ocean, that indicates the presence of God. So that is how, that power that we experience through the tempests, okay, the power that we experience through the storms indicate the presence of God. And where do we experience these storms? We experience them over the surface of the ocean. So that is why the poet says that the ocean is like a mirror to Almighty himself. It is in the oceans that we see the reflection of God himself via the tempest, via the storms. Then, in all time, calm or convulsed, in breeze or gale or storm. Now he goes on to describe the sea and its various aspects. What does he say? In all time, always. Always we can see the reflection of God in the ocean. Whether the ocean is calm, I've already explained you, whether the ocean is calm or whether the ocean is turbulent, whether there is a beautiful soft breeze blowing, or whether there is a gale, a stronger breeze, okay, a stronger wind, or a storm. or a very strong wind blowing, which makes everything go topsy turvy, everything turbulent. Either way, we realize the presence of God through these different mediums. Okay, then he moves on to talking about the icing at the poles. He says, icing the pole or in the torrid climb. Okay, if you notice the Antarctic or if you notice the Arctic, you will see that they are all through the year, they are completely frozen, they are completely covered with ice, they are frozen. Okay, and they say that the whole of the caps look white in color. So when you look at these poles, it is almost like the image of God. Or in the torrid climb, again the hot climate, the terrible hot summers that we experience, whether it is winters, whether it is summers, it is the reflection of God Himself. Dark heaving, boundless, endless, and sublime. Again, different ways, different words, different description. Dark and heaving, you have seen when the ocean gets stormy, it becomes dark. Especially when do the storms come? When the storms come, usually the rain and hail also is accompanied. And usually, when does it happen? When the sky is overcast with dark clouds. Okay, full dark clouds when they cover the sky, and along with that the storm arrives, along with that the hail and rainfall arrives, and the whole atmosphere, the whole surrounding becomes dark, it becomes almost nightly. Okay, so here he says whether it is dark heaving, the waters are heaving, when the wind is moving very fast, when it is stormy, the sea starts upheaving, it becomes turbulent, and it is boundless, it is endless, and it is sublime. So these three words that are being used here: boundless, which does not have any parameter, which does not have any defined boundary; boundless, endless, which does not end, which is ever continuous; and sublime, which is beautiful, which is true, which is kind of, this is the word that we usually use for God Himself. So these three words are describing the ocean, but at the same time these three terms are also describing the beauty of the Almighty. These words have actually been used for God Himself. Okay, so through the usage of these words, he is trying to describe God. And he says the image of eternity. This is the image that is reflected in the waters of the ocean. And this image is again boundless. This image of the sea is also boundless. If any, I think most of us have seen the seaside. And usually when we stand on the seashore, we cannot see the end of the ocean. It is next to impossible. Even if we travel over the sea on a ship, or even if we travel, via the planes, to see if one side till the other side of the ocean is next to impossible. So the feeling that we get, the image that we get is that the sea is endless. It is limitless. It is unending. Okay, and the same quality God Himself also possesses. God is also limitless, unending, boundless. Okay, not bound by any kind of parameters, not bound by any kind of boundaries. So this is the description that the poet gives us. So this sea is the image of eternity, the throne of the invisible. And now the poet moves on to elaborately describe the sea as the throne of the king. And who's the king? It is the Almighty, it is God Himself. So this sea, this ocean is the seat of the Lord Himself, is the throne of God Himself, who is invisible. God is invisible, cannot be seen with bare eyes. Okay? So the same thing he says. So the throne of the invisible is the ocean itself, even from out thy slime. Now what is slime? Slime is that dirty, muddy, material that is found inside the sea. And from that slime, the sea monsters are created. So he says, even from out of you can say the dirtiest portions of the ocean, even the dirtiest portion of the ocean has the capacity, the power to create these huge monsters, these huge sea animals. And where are they created? Where do they live? They live inside the depth of the ocean. Inside the depth, these creatures are created, and they live inside, these huge creatures live inside the fathomless ocean. Then he moves on to say, each zone obeys thee. So all this is kind of, they are subjugated by the ocean itself. They all are under the power of the ocean. And ocean itself is what? Is the seat of the Almighty, is the throne of the Almighty. And everybody obeys this ocean. Everybody obeys, or you can say, everybody bows down to the power of the ocean. Thou goest forth, dread, fathomless, alone. Again, in this last line, please note all these words, all these adjectives that have been used for the ocean are equally applicable on God Himself. Okay? Because what does God do? God also moves freely, right? Obey. Now, everybody obeys God. This whole earth, this whole planet works under some mechanism, works under some power, and according to that power, everything moves. This earth rotates, this earth goes around the sun. So Byron says that everybody obeys God. And who is the reflection of that God? It is the ocean itself. So who obeys the ocean? Everyone. Who obeys God? Everyone. So ocean is kind of, you can say, is after the image of God Himself. They are one and the other, you can say that. That's how Byron is trying to explain the might of the Lord. And that's how Byron is also trying to explain the might of the ocean, right? Then he says, you go forth. Goest, again, Old English, you go forth, you move forward very fearlessly. Goest forth means to move forward, right? To step forward, to walk forward, to move ahead. So he says, you go forth dreadful. You are dreadful. People fear you. You are that powerful. You are mighty. You are fearful. You are fathomless, and you are alone. Fathomless, again, you are bottomless. Your depth cannot be measured by man. Again, depth of God also cannot be measured by man. It is beyond the capacity of a human being to measure the depth, the width, the height, the sublimity of the Almighty, of God Himself. And similarly, it is impossible to measure the depth, the width, okay, the extent, the boundaries of the mighty ocean. So here he says, you go forth, you are fearful, you are dreadful, you are bottomless, you are wide, you are magnificent, you are beautiful. And just as you are powerful, similarly, you are reflecting the glory of the Lord Himself. You are reflecting the glory of the Almighty, the God Himself. So you can see that this particular passage is extremely full of, you can say, it is full of different adjectives. It's full of those images that are trying to explain us how Byron experiences the power of the ocean, and how Byron experiences the power of God Himself. He is, you can say, in a way trying to define, trying to describe the power of the Almighty. And how is he doing it? He is doing it through the image of the ocean itself, because the ocean also embodies all those qualities that are embodied within the Almighty, embodied within God Himself, right? So Here I hope this passage is clear. I have tried to explain each and every word. I have tried to give you the word meanings. I have tried to explain how the different similes or metaphors have been made use of in order to make the idea of what Byron is trying to convey through this imagery, through this poem. So I'll end here now. This is the sixth paragraph, and I am so sorry that I have to break this poem into paragraphs, but we have a time limit. We have been told to have videos of maybe 15 to 20 minutes, and in that, we are supposed to wind up our lecture. Okay, so that is the reason you students must be thinking why ma'am is only taking one paragraph, but this poem is long, so I cannot help it. I will have to go paragraph wise. I hope things are clear, and once again, thank you so much for being with me. Please pass on this video to your fellow students, and if there is any issue, any problem, any words that you don't understand, any concept that you do not understand, please get in touch with me over the WhatsApp. So once again, wishing you all the best. Thank you. Good day. Bye bye.